leadership. Our organisation is only 3 years old, but the 3 partners who lead the organisation have been working in capacity building with non-profits, each for over 20 years. So, despite my youthful looks, we've been doing this for a little while. And one of the areas that I specialise in is non-profit governance, and these governance bites are a chance to reflect, brush up, and improve our governance as non-profit organisations. I'll just explain a couple of things, and then I'll get you to move, seeing as you're all nicely settled now. First of all, you'll notice on the table that there's a big A3 size sheet of paper. Any of you who have ever gone to a pizza family restaurant will immediately recognise the colour-in placemat. So you've got your own colour-in placemat for the evening, specially prepared, and it should also take away all the main ideas that we talk about if you fill it in and colour it in, and that's what the felts on the table are there for. And I have a fabulous prize that I'm going to award at the end of the evening for the most colourful or messiest placemat. Okay, so just to get our competitive juices going, because often people will see pristine, clear paper. They don't like filling things in or mucking about with it. But I want you to get your hands dirty and play with our placemat. There's another piece of coloured paper which I'll come back to later. And there's also some bits and pieces in the middle of the table. Sometimes I forget to explain these, and people are waiting all night to see what great exercise we're going to do with them, and you're disappointed when they go home and haven't done them. They're not for any particular exercise. They are just because some of us kind of concentrate better when we're fiddling, and so that's for those of you who like to do that. And there's a variety of things to fiddle with. I hope it will meet most of your needs. Just don't throw it at any other live person in the room. But otherwise, play with it as you will. Okay, so people have now got their mouth full too, so that's probably a good time to get you moving. But I just remembered one thing. So we're meeting over 6 months. Generally, it's the first Wednesday in the month, but those of you who plan ahead, like a couple of days, will realise that the first Wednesday in this month is closely related to local holidays and Waitangi Day, and so we're holding it on the last Wednesday of January rather than the first Wednesday of Tuesday. But after that, it's all the first Wednesday is 5:30. I understand that the Volunteer Marlborough are trying to find a better venue. We've got a little bit more room to move. So probably, hopefully, you won't be here next time, but you'll hear all about that. Make sure you have left your email address if you haven't registered beforehand with the organisers so that you can keep in touch about that. We've selected 6 topics. I'll talk a little bit more about the other ones at the end of tonight, the other 5. And they were based on a meeting that we held here in November that talked about what were the priority areas that people wanted to focus on in terms of looking at non-profit governance. So they come out of trying to massage together as many of those ideas as we sensibly could that people would prioritise. I recognise some of the faces in the room who were there and some of you who were not. Okay, that's enough introduction, because we're going to go into the first exercise, which is I want you to think about how well your life is governed. So I don't want you to worry about your NGO or non-profit or community group at the moment. Just think about your life. Let's get personal. Now, having said that, I do want to remind people this is a workshop, not therapy, so you only have to share as much as you want to share. And you can lie completely if you want to. You can have as many alternative truths as you want to. But just think about if you were assessing how well your life is governed, if there was a continuum from one end, your life is well governed, give the board an award, to the other end, not very well governed, poorly governed, send in an administrator. Think about where you would be on that continuum. While you're thinking, I'm actually going to get you to place yourself physically on that continuum, and we're going to go out into the hall, and up this end I'm going to put my life is not well governed, send in administrator, and down that end I'm going to put my life is well governed, give the board an award. And remember, we're talking about your life, not your organisation or NGO. So rank yourself on there. You can have two people on the same spot because you might be equally well or badly governed. So it doesn't have to be a line; it's a continuum. Does that make sense? So up and out. You can bring your pizza with you. This is not well done. So that's not well governed to send it in an administrator. Well governed to yes, we're okay. This end is not well governed, send it in an administrator. That end is well governed. Get that okay? Well governed with the law and order. I'm sorry. Poorly governed. Poorly governed. Okay. Everyone happy where they are? Correct. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to now justify yourself. Okay. So turn to a person near you and in pairs. Explain to them why you put yourself there and not 10 centimetres to the right or 10 centimetres to the left. Why do you pick that particular spot in terms of do it in pairs, whether you're doing too big a group, you won't have time to roll.
Not working here. Sorry? Not working like that here.
It just takes practice, I found. Yeah, I'm not very good at it myself. I'm a late learner. Yeah. I think saying food When I put my hand in the air, that means you can be quiet. And I don't have to shout at you. I learned that from a kindergarten teacher. So, both of you had a chance to share. Anyone need more time to explain themselves? Okay. Now, what I want you to do, as you know, you can talk about this with your partner as well, is just try to work out what was the criteria you were using? Because in order to assess yourself, you had to have some criteria. It might not have been conscious, it might have been unconscious, subconscious. But you must have some criteria of what good governance is. So see if you can uncover what the criteria you were using for good governance. Okay, I've got a chance to share your ideas. You can come back in if you haven't finish up the conversation, and just come back into your
Yeah, all right, tomorrow. Oh, yeah, no, she's back.
Don't worry, it's only showing me. That doesn't show any better.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, it does. Okay, so you might want to somewhere on this on your placemat, probably where it says "What is good governance," write down some of the thoughts that came to you as what were the criteria that you used. So this is your implicit understanding of what good governance is, because you used it when I asked you a crazy question. Okay. So, well, you can write anywhere you like, really, but I would suggest just under what is good governance. And then in a moment, I'm just going to share some of those ideas. Okay, so anyone can shout out what were some of the criteria that they discovered were in the back of their mind when they think about good governance?
Planning.
So there was planning happen.
Some goals.
Goals set. Yep. Okay.
Direction.
Sorry? I didn't hear that.
Direction.
Direction.
And focus. Lack of chaos.
Lack of chaos.
Can you speak?
So I'm also going to put organised there next to lack of chaos to put into the positive.
Ability.
Sorry, someone just said something else that I.
Values met.
Values met. Thank you.
Ability to self-reflect.
Anyone else have any?
Finding your place in the world.
So
Finding your place in the world.
Yep.
Review.
Review was happening.
Addressing issues.
So
Addressing issues.
addressing issues. So I said, anyone have anything about finances or not? You're not concerned?
That comes under issues.
Right. Financially viable, your family is financially viable. Is it the bankruptcy court? Any other things that people? That's a great list. So you already have a pretty good idea about what are some of the key elements of good governance. And in fact, sometimes the problem is we have too many ideas, and it's about what do we focus on. So it's not because you don't have any idea. We all have some ideas, even at a subconscious level. That exercise, apart from being a fun way to mix people up to introduce yourselves, is a way of helping to uncover a little bit what are some of our implicit or assumed ideas about good governance. And whether it's in our life or in our NGO or wherever, the same kind of principles will apply. Now, there's something else that I think is also really important for good governance, and that's origami. Okay, so I'm going to teach you some origami. Anyone here an expert on origami? That's great. I hate when there are experts in the room. So this is what you need that coloured sheet of paper for.
I thought origami was essentially plant.
Oh, no.
Macrame. No, we will not be doing macrame. Macrame is useless for governance. Why did you think macrame? It would be important for governance. It's origami, and that's not little plants. Now, a couple of introductory concepts. This is landscape position and this is portrait position. Okay, people got that? So I'm going to be holding it up to show you, but it'll be easier if you do it on the table. So first of all, put it into landscape position and fold one side over so that it meets the other side. And once the edges are right, this is handy hint. Get the edges right first, and then do the crease. Okay. So don't do the crease first. The edges right, then do the crease. And your third handy hint is you can use your fingernails to get a nice sharp edge. Yep, all doing very well. All following instructions, wonderful. Okay. So then you open it out again, still down on the page, and do it so that the open, like that, you know what I mean. The pointy bit is down. And then what I want you to do is to take one side and fold it over into the middle. And once you've got it correctly lined up, also then do another crease and use your fingernails to do that as well. So it'll look like that. Everyone's following me very well. You can phone a friend or you can ask someone at the table or if you get behind or going too fast. So, okay, you got that? You do that. And then you just repeat on the other side. Okay. And again, a sharp edge And this is where it gets complicated. Open it up again, but it should have these nice sharp edges when you open it up. And what I want you to do, this is the really hard bit, is to fold that into there so that you make a triangle shape like that. And what you've now got is your nameplate. That you can use at a board meeting or you can use it at workshops. And I'm going to get you to write your name, and you'll notice that you write your name on the second one. See one, not the one that's underneath, okay? Don't write it on the one that's underneath. And I'm going to give you some thick pens, so you write your name big, so that even I can see it without my glasses on, okay? Let's get some more. Okay, no one get lost. That's wonderful. Also shows that you're great at following directions. Okay, so what I want to talk about is this. So this is a kind of overview session that a lot of the other sessions will be based on the ideas behind it. And I want to talk about this idea of boards making a difference or adding value. Because as someone who's been involved in organisations, non-profit organisations, on the board, on staff, managing them for quite a number of years, the thing that frustrated me was when it felt like, okay, we had to have a board because that was the law, but they were not actually adding any value to the organisation. It was just happening. In fact, one of the little posters says, would your organisation be any different if the board stopped meeting? It's a scary question. Some organisations, I'm afraid the answer would be not much, not for everyone. But how do we get us all adding the most value, making the most difference? Because non-profit organisations don't have people or money or resources to spare. We want to make sure everything is getting the biggest bang for our buck out of them. And so this worried me for quite a while, because I think there's also a bit of it where we play let's pretend. So sometimes when boards have paid staff, the manager writes the strategic plan and the board finds the spelling mistake on page 3 and then says it was the board's strategic plan. So unless proofreading is your main talent, there's not a lot of added value. And there's quite a bit of kind of let's pretend in organisations, and often the bigger they get, the more let's pretend there is. So big organisations are not necessarily the best models for how boards can add value. Some of the best value is sometimes added in small organisations, especially when they're all volunteer organisations. Okay, so this kind of worried me for a while until I came across this little bit of research that even when I first came across it had been written, had been undertaken a while ago, but it really kind of gave me a new insight that I didn't have before. So that's why I want to share it with you. And it's going to be the main focus of tonight. It's by a couple called Harlan and Sadel. It was done in 1994, so it's done last century, last millennium. It was done in a very different context. So it was done in the US, and it was done with organisations that get government funding, which you may or may not, and they were mostly social service organisations. And some of you will be, some of you won't be. So the context is quite a little bit different. So you'll need to be the ones to judge which bits of this fit us and which bits don't. You know your context better than anyone else in the room. So you be the judges of that. This research also was really very kind of focused, a bit over-focused, I think, because it only looked at where do boards add value in the organisation's relationship with their government funder. So they're only looking at one relationship, the funding relationship, but I think what they found applies more generally. So again, up to you to work out whether it does apply or not. So I'll just, without more ado, I will just explain what they found. They basically found 4 levels or 4 dimensions in which boards actually added value. So this was not a theoretical study, and this is not a should study. This is not saying, oh, boards should do this. When you get into the world of governance, you will find libraries full of should books. Most of them are totally unrealistic and assume that the person has nothing else to do with their life except be a board member. They've got an IQ of 150 and they look like Brad Pitt and they are wonderfully, and they're as ethical as Mahatma Gandhi. So they just assume these amazing, unrealistic expectations. What I like about this research, it wasn't saying what should happen, wasn't worried about that, it was just saying what did happen where that boards added value. So we're just looking for where that happened. And as I said, 4 levels. The first level that they saw value being added to the funder relationship by board members was as practical helper. So in the researcher's example, the board members might help with applications, might help opening doors to funders where they had a personal relationship, might help having a look at accountability reports back to the funder to see if there are other things that they could add to it. But apart from the funder relationship, what I'd like you to do is just have a little chat on your table and see if you can think of other examples where boards and board members can do practical helping tasks that help the organisation in different contexts, in your context, for example. So just have a chat with other people on your table.
From my experience, it's more so the general manager makes comments or makes a strategy or thinking about what he's gives that up and that's these things. Especially
On the school.
So just from any table, any ideas that people have of examples of where the boards add value? And if you want to fill it in, you can use this chart to do that. Anyone got any examples?
Different skill sets.
Yep. What kind of skills were you thinking of?
You say HR, those sorts of things. Compliance.
Risk management.
We sort of define that as offering professional or technical expertise.
Right. You can see I did want to be a doctor at one stage in life. I had the writing all worked out, but I didn't pass the medical exams. Anyone got any other?
Oh, well, we had availability.
Right.
Maybe organising events.
Yep.
We know links to how to do that.
Relationships.
Relationships, yep. So they bring relationships in.
Sounding board.
Sounding board. Great. Okay. Any other ones who particularly want to add?
One of our board members actually got a group of people together to actually go and physically help a project.
Right.
Physically help a project.
Right. So I used to be on the committee for the Kashmir Wanderers. It's not a walking group, it's a soccer team when the kids were younger. And one of the jobs of the committee at the end of each season was to clean out the clubhouse. Now, the clubhouse was one of those sheds you got from 1 to 10. It was about as big as one arm. But it's amazing. By the end of the season, it would be covered. The floor would be covered in mud, odd socks, broken shoe studs, balls that needed reinflating and things like that. And one of the things that the committee did each year was clean it out. So when the new committee came, they had a nice clean clubhouse to start with. Any more practical or hands-on than that?
Because I don't think that's the board's job.
Right.
Do that.
We'll talk about that in a moment. Yeah. So is this the board's job? Shall I say? As I said, this research was about what happened, not what should have. But before we look at some of the other things, why do you think boards and board members could add value by doing these things above and beyond what staff or other volunteers do?
Because they're invested in the organisation, leading by example.
Right, okay.
To help keep costs down.
They're free. Anything else?
Alongside each other.
Yep, working together.
Creates a bit of bond between board and staff.
Right, together. And so sometimes it's also just a numbers game. Like, there are 6 or 8 board members and there's half or one staff person. So when you need something done and you need some more hands, that's a first port of call. And as you said here, sometimes it's also not just numbers, but quality, or if numbers are quantity, they would have particular expertise that you might not have on staff or other volunteers. So, thinking about your NGO, I'm not sure how big your PR department is. It's probably not quite as big as your accounts division and your strategic financial management branch or your investment group. We generally expect staff to be Jacks and Jills of all trades, but sometimes you need people who know something about a particular area, and one way of doing that is you can get them on the board. Some people say we have people on our board that we could never afford to pay because of their particular expertise or whatever. So there's the kind of what I call quantity and quality. Okay, so that was one level which these boards were adding value that they researched. The second level or dimension aspect that they identified was boards acting as ambassadors or advocates for the organisation. So representing the organisation to others, in this case to funders, but it could also be representing them to an interagency group or representing a branch to a national group, or speaking up on behalf of the organisation to attract supporters, volunteers, as well as funders or whatever. Just have a chat in your table about why board members could add value in doing this above and beyond what staff, for example, could do. So just have a quick chat around the table about that. Why do you think board members could add value doing these tasks?
So you're spreading
Okay. So I'm aware I'm cutting it off midstream, but I just want to get your first thoughts on this so we get through all four. Any ideas about why boards or board members could be adding value in this ambassador role?
It's about your networks.
Sorry, it's
About your networks.
networks, yes. They might have extra networks. And that might just be because there are 8 of them, or 10 of them, or whatever. And it might also be because of particular mana or connections or prestige that you might be able to get with board members who bring those networks with them. I was working with one organisation in Auckland who operated across a range of different areas and running programs, but also they wanted to try and advocate to change some government policies that adversely affected their area. And they realised that they were not doing very well on this because they didn't know how to do it. And they could not afford a PR firm or a lobbying group. So they decided the next board member they would look out for a retired politician who was sympathetic to their cause. Someone who knew how the Wellington system worked, maybe had some connections there, whatever. And again, it was a case of they could never afford to employ that person, but they could get them for free. Okay. Any other ideas?
I think on our board, having a consumer or somebody who's experienced,
Yes.
whatever the group, the issue, whatever, it has brought much more kind of real, authentic kind of wisdom to the board.
So sometimes that special expertise is life experience, not necessarily academic knowledge, and connections. Any other things that people talked about? I think the quantity thing helps here too with the networks, like just having more people have more relationships, no matter how well connected your manager or coordinator might be. 8 or 10 people are likely to have some connections that are missing. No one person's going to have all those good connections. Trying to remember what the ad was for. I think it was for Toyota second-hand cars, and they're refurbishing the cars, and a whole lot of people who are doing the work say, we do the repainting, and it's fantastic result. People saying, we did fix the upholstery and have a fantastic result. And then there's one person at the end. Anyone remember the end?
Yes.
What was that? So
So
it's the guy from the AA, and he says, yeah, I reckon they produce good cars, and I don't have to say that because I'm from the AA, not one of the people doing the work. And it's a little bit like organisations, isn't it? That the slight independence of the board from the day-to-day work can add credibility. So it's not saying that staff and other volunteers have less commitment to the organisation, but somehow or other, a board member saying this is a great organisation and you can support it carries more weight than a manager saying this is a great organisation, you should support it, by the way, it pays my salary. So just having that little bit of independence of a voluntary board member, does that make sense? Adds that extra credibility, I think. So I think there is some credibility factor. Not because paid staff are any less credible, but that's just how things are seen. People seem to have more self-interest if they're employed on it.
Is there some more authority if it's like the board chair or something like that?
Yeah. I think there is. It's slightly different from personal money. It's the authority of the position, isn't it?
Yeah.
The prestige of the position. This is so can be taken advantage of as well. Great. Okay. Halfway there. Now, the third dimension they talked about is the boards as buffer. This is all this is spelled with a B, not a D. Please note that very carefully. That was a joke. You're supposed to laugh. Okay. All the people on Facebook were laughing, I should tell you. Okay. So before obviously they're using buffer as a metaphor, but before we look at the metaphor, what is an actual buffer?
Stops the train.
Stops the trains. That's right. Yeah.
It's a way of saying.
Yeah. So it's like a bumper bar on the car. So it not only stops things, but it has a very particular way of doing that. Yeah, it absorbs outside impact. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I am told that originally the word buffer referred to those things on trains, and now we use it more broadly. But you know those round things on the end of carriages? So the carriages bump into each other. And again, I'm also told, so don't blame me if you find out on Wikipedia that it's false, that the reason they had to do that was when carriages on the train are running along and bumping into each other, they multiply the energy of bumping into each other. And literally, without the buffers to absorb that energy, the carriages would end up being derailed. So you would literally go off the tracks if you didn't have some way of absorbing some of that external energy. It doesn't stop energy altogether. It doesn't protect the organisation, the carriage from being bumped into, but it absorbs some of that energy so that being bumped into has less disastrous consequences. Okay, so people are now thinking about that metaphor. So I think what they meant here is with boards as buffers is that boards are a kind of protection that absorbs some of the outside pressures that might derail the organisation. Sometimes those pressures come from funders who might want you to do good things but not your thing. Rarely is the threat, someone wanting you to do something evil. Or take out a contract shooting on someone, or run drugs for them. Usually it's just to divert you away from your main business or run things in a slightly different way. So what this research found was boards actually provided a very useful role in being the organisational buffer. Now again, I'm going to ask you that same question. Why could boards do some of this work above and beyond what an individual manager, staff member, or an individual volunteer could do? So have a chat in the tables, see if you can come up with some ideas.
What about around something done straight away? Best way to say, sorry, we'll just decide that. We can't tell you straight away that this is not just the board side of
Anyone got some ideas on this? Why might boards be able to do something, add some value, do something additional to what a manager or another individual might do? Because presumably they want to keep things on track and as well. It's not the prerogative just of the board to do that. But
because when there's multiple people, you're less likely to get raided off.
Yes, yes. So there's protection in numbers. There's actually more recently a lot of research on what's been dubbed wisdom of the crowds. I don't know if you've seen any of that, but basically it shows the more people you ask, the more accurate answers you get, not the more expert they are. And there's this wonderful bit of research that looked at the stock exchange and see who could predict when stocks would go up. And the 80 garbage collectors of New York had a more accurate result than any single investment advisor, just because there were 80 of them. No single garbage collector was any better than the investment advisors, but there's just something about numbers. There's also a bit of protection in numbers. It's not an individual who made the tough decision, it's the group. So sorry, that's a board decision. So it's a bit harder to undermine it because it's a collective responsibility. So there is some protection in those numbers. Don't tell anyone, but I used to use as a Just realised it's being broadcast to the world. I used to use as a tactic, if I was losing a negotiation in a room when I was a manager, I used to say, oh, well, I understand where you're coming from, but I have to take that to my board. That way I can get out of the room without losing. Whereas if you're just on your own, there's a much more pressure.
Gives you a cool down period.
Gives you a cool down period, yeah. Okay, any other ways any other thoughts about how boards could be run?
Because you can be, you try to be as objective as you can and try to take all the emotion out of it.
Yes, yeah. You're onto something really, what I think is really important. And this was a tough lesson for me to learn. And in fact, I only learned it after I left my last job as a manager of an organisation. In retrospect, I learned it. I wish I'd learned it beforehand. I just got to tell you that story. I was manager of this organisation in, see if you can wipe the secret off that I just exposed to you. I was manager of an organisation in Australia, a national organisation. It was an anti-poverty lobbying group and represented welfare groups. This was pre-internet. I was the one who put their finances online and did that, all that disastrous stuff. Anyone who'd been in organisations at that period of moving from manual to electronic everything. But anyway, most of my time there, this was pre-email and internet things, and the board was made up of 2 representatives of each state, so that's 14, plus 4 or 5 national member organisations, that's 18 or 19, plus a directly elected president and a directly elected treasurer, so you're in your low 20s, and I think I might probably forgot someone. So there's more than 20 to 25 board members around the table, which is quite a gaggle of board members to tame. And because people came from every state and territory, it was quite expensive to get people physically in the room. So we only met 4 times a year, and one of those was our AGM. But we met on a Friday and a Saturday, so people only had to take one day off work and one day of their family time. So these were quite intensive meetings, 2-day meetings, 3 big ones and a little one associated with the AGM every year. Because it was a lot of its work was advocacy on issues and trying to change government's opinion about things, as well as having to have policies for how we run ourselves. We had to agree on what our policy was for what we were pushing for. So there's that level of stuff too. So that meant there were quite a lot of things that these board members had to agree on. And the board papers were getting thicker and thicker. Literally, at one stage, they were about that thick. Now, that, in my defence, that did include reports attached, so people had background information on things, but it was literally about that thick. You could only just get it in the courier envelopes, I remember. Now, I had a very wise chair at the time who pulled me aside as the board papers were starting to expand and said, Garth, now, we selected you because we trusted your ethics and we thought you were smart enough to do the things that we wanted in managing the organisations. We only want the bottom line from you. You don't need to give us all that detail, just the bottom line. If we're uncertain of something, we'll ask for more, but we want less, not more. We just want the short answer, the bottom line, the options that we need to make decisions on. We don't need to know everything that you know. And I was always brought up to be a polite young boy, so I nodded and smiled and secretly thought to myself, the lazy buggers. Here I am, I have to write this stuff and they can't even be bothered reading it. It's about takes about a tenth of the time. But I thought, oh well, I'll do as I was told, because I was taught to be an obedient boy. So I did try and reduce the size and did quite a bit. Probably not as much as they wanted, but more than I wanted. But So the day I left that organisation, I thought, if they were really as committed as me, they would want to know all those details as well. I was completely wrong. Because in fact, if you take my perspective to its logical conclusion, I wanted them all to know all the details that I knew. I wanted them all to have all the same complexities and competing information that I had. I wanted them all to, in fact, be just like me. So I never even thought this out loud, but I probably underline that as an assumption that the perfect board would be 25 Garths around the table. Now, you don't know me that well, but let me assure you, 25 Garths around the table is not necessarily everyone's dream board. In fact, some people's nightmare. And in fact, there was already one of me. You know, we didn't need another 24 of me. There was no point in having a group of people if they're all going to be the same, having all the same information, all identical. Only when I read this research did I realise that one of the reasons that boards can be good buffers is because they don't know all the details. They're not absorbed in all the day-to-day stuff as well as the big picture. Now, a good manager does also have to keep their eye on the big picture. They're not just doing the running the organisation on day-to-day. They want to know where it's going and why, whatever. But that's one of many things they have to do, along with knowing, you know, can we make payroll next fortnight? Should we change our telephone system? What issue should we be lobbying on this week? How do I recruit the new person quickly because we've got some urgent tasks, you know, and all the other things that you do when you're managing an organisation. If I had just made them, all the board members like me, worrying about all the details like me, they wouldn't be able to exclusively focus on the big picture. So, I've called this thing, I think I made it up, critical distance. It's definitely not in that research. Maybe I read it somewhere else. But one of the advantages, one of the strengths, one of the value adds of boards is not knowing all the details, not being swamped by all the details, so they can concentrate on the big picture. Where are we heading? What are our values? What's the most important thing? And so I thought them not knowing all the details was the problem I had to overcome. So that's why I was shoveling all this information. But in fact, it was the value they were adding, not knowing all the details. That's a completely different mindset. That was a big revelation for me, unfortunately too late for this organisation, but it survived, so we all do. But I think not knowing all the details is actually an advantage. And I'll tell you one specific story from that organisation that I think illustrates it really well. We had a lot of project people because we got money for particular specific projects that didn't last for long. Whatever. No one wants to fund core costs. You know, ever heard of that story? Anyway, we had recruited a person for a project, a 12-month project, and she was fabulous. She was really smart. She shared our values. She was really aligned with what we were trying to do. You know, you don't have to hint at what the task was, and she knew exactly how to do it. She was very effective at this project. In fact, so much so that she got all that project work done and also contributed to other stuff. So she was a real asset to the organisation in that 12 months that she was there. Because I recruited her and she worked, you know, just a couple of metres away from me, I also happened to know that she was a single mum, so this was the sole income for the family, the time-limited job that she had with us. Her 12 months were coming to an end, so I was thinking, you know, is there some way I can keep her? She's a great person, good values, and also I know it's really important in her life to have some continuity of income. And this funding opportunity came along. Now, it wasn't exactly our core business, but it wasn't illegal. Yeah, we could happily do it, and no animals would be harmed in the process. And I thought, she would probably have some time left over to contribute to other things as well. So I went to the board to say, I think we should do this other project And you know what? The board didn't know this woman. In fact, they had they never actually met her. They come in 4 times a year. And they said, really, Garth, do you think this is where we should be focusing our energy? I know there's some money for it, but it also takes away your time and concentration if you're managing the project, and we don't want you to be focused on that. These are the things we need to focus on. And we had quite a robust discussion, and in the end, they overruled my recommendation, and I had to tell the woman I didn't have to sack her because the project came to an end. It was effectively sacked her. And I think the reason they were able to make that, what is a tough decision, much easier was because they didn't know all the details. They were not conflicted by all the complexities. They knew enough of the important things, and they asked the right questions. How does this align with our mission and values? How does it align with our priorities for what we will do over the next year or two? So it wasn't not knowing enough. They made the decision out of ignorance. It was not being distracted by the irrelevant stuff. They could focus on the important things. So that's what I mean by the importance of critical distance. I think they were right to overrule me. Okay, I don't say that often to people, so anyway, but that is the one mistake I have made in my life, apart from relationships. But we won't go into that. Okay, the fourth dimension that they talk about is really it's kind of overlaps with the buffer stuff, and on some days I'm not sure why they made it a separate category, but I think they wanted to emphasise it to give it its own visibility. And they talked about the role of the boards and the board members as the values guardians of the organisation. The kaitiaki of the kaupapa. When I first came to Christchurch, which is where I live, been there now for 25 years, some of you may have detected a slight West Island accent. You're correct. I originally came from Australia. When I first came to Christchurch, I was with many organisations, and among those, I was welcomed onto Rehua Marae, which is an urban marae in Christchurch. And after the welcoming ceremony, which in itself, for people who experience that the first time, is really quite a significant thing to happen. We went into completed over kai, tea, and in the dining room, we sat in a circle and everyone introduced themselves about what their role was in the organisation. And one person, when we got around halfway, so most people were saying, well, I run the Komatua housing, or I run the childcare service, or I do this or I do that. But this one person, when it came around to her, she said that I am the kaitiaki of the kaupapa. And of course, that meant absolutely nothing to me at the time. But what she was saying was she was the guardian of the mission and values of the organisation. She was the chair of the board. And so I think she knew exactly what her key role was to be, the protector of the mission and values of the organisation. And with that critical distance of not being involved in all the details, board members had more capacity to do that because there's more free thinking space, and it's less cluttered with these other important demands. This is not to say that other staff and volunteers are not committed to the mission and values of the organisation. You want them to be that, but that's one of many things. And the unique value add of the board is this is their one true job. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to leave the research and go on to the Garth's interpretation of it now, if you haven't already heard a lot of my theory. But just so we don't blame the authors. They identified boards do these 4 things. But I don't think all four are equally important. As someone's already said, he questioned whether that practical helping role was really the board's role or not, even though they can add value here, and they do in practice. Especially in small organisations or all volunteer organisations, that's often a core part of what they do. But even so, I don't think all of these functions are of equal value. I think it's in fact in the reverse order, so that the most important thing is this values guardianship role. And a lot of board members say to me, where should I focus my time? There seems to be something new added each year. It's not occupational health and safety, it's conflict of interest, or some new financial reporting requirement, or some change to our audit expectations. It just keeps ratcheting up all the things that I'm supposed to do. I don't have unlimited time. The board is not my life. I do have a life. What can I focus on? So my answer to those boards is, if you can't do anything else, just be fantastic values guardians. Do that really well and with all your heart and with all your mind, and you will add enormous value to the organisation. You will make a big difference. If you've got time and energy left over after that, then take on some of these other buffer roles, and do them fabulously well. Don't spread yourself too thinly, doing all of these half-assed. Do what you do well. That's what makes the difference. If you've still got time and energy and commitment after being a fantastic values guardian and a great buffer, then you can take on some of these ambassador roles as well. One of the things I forgot to highlight when we were talking about this is ambassadors not only represent countries out, they also bring intelligence back in, bring information back in. And I think board members as ambassadors can do both as well. They can advocate for the organisation and they can bring ideas and feedback in. That's, I should have said earlier. If you've got time and energy left over, do that and do it well. And then, if you've got time and energy left over, be the practical helper. Do the practical helping stuff and do that really well. The problem is, this is me thinking speed, I think the problem is that mostly we start the other way around and we start doing the practical helping work, and there's so much practical helping work that needs to be done that it's almost endless and you never get on to the next stage, or the other stuff is only in the spare time or the luxury icing on the cake, not the cool stuff. I think, again, this is just my theory, I think the reason that happens is because if you don't know what to do, you do what you know. So if people are invited onto a board and no one has ever really clearly said what the board's role is, they want to be helpful, so they'll be helpers. And if they're an accountant, they'll give you financial advice. If they're a lawyer, they'll give you legal expertise. If they've got good relationships with politicians, they'll introduce you to politicians. And they can spend all of their governance time doing that practical helping stuff. And all of that is helpful by definition, or it's not practical help. But it's not the key role of the board. And the reason I say that is because in the end, you can buy this. You can go to a shop and get legal advice. And in fact, you can go to a community law centre and probably get it for free, but or you can get pro bono from a law firm. But you don't have to be on the board to give legal advice. However, you do have to be at the heart of the organisation to be the guardian of its values. You can't buy values guardianship off the shelf or on a casual basis. You need to be at the heart of the organisation, involved in what it's doing, its key decisions, know and committed to what's really on about the why, not just the what. You have to be in there to do this. Does that make sense? So that's why I think this is the irreducible bit, because you can't buy it. The stuff you get down here can be replaced by other volunteers can do this stuff. When we cleaned out the Kashmir Wanderers club room, we actually could have recruited a cleaning crew, or we could have paid someone to clean it. And in fact, that thought did occur to some of us at some time. This would be much better if we paid someone to do this. Because you don't need to be at the heart of the organisation to clean the clubhouse, but you do need to be at the heart of the organisation to guard its values, make sure it's on track, and keep that well aligned. Does that make sense? So, just on your tables, have a chat about how these functions get done in your organisations. Are you paying most attention up here? Are you distracted by some of the stuff down here? Is this stuff not even talked about on your board? I'll give you a spoiler alert. Most boards don't talk about it. They just assume everyone knows what you should do. It's the really smart and effective boards that do talk about it. Over to you, have a chat. Where are you up to? How does this apply? Does this research teach you anything?
It's all just when the change was made, it sort of just went from we'll look after children to
Okay. I'll interrupt you again. A few lively conversations going on there. And I don't want this to be true confession, so I don't want your assessments about your own organisations. I don't need to know that. But do people find this framework useful for thinking about what risks to focus on? And maybe we could take it back to your board to say, what are we focusing on, where we need to spend more time, where we need to spend less time, get more energy, less energy. Great. One of the things that's a trap with this is everyone's discovered mission statements and value statements. The most heinous commercial organisations in the world will have a set of values somewhere. So the big trap here is we can get seduced into thinking just if we write something down, we've been the values guardian. What we're talking about here is not writing something down. This is not having a nicely crafted mission statement. This is about values in action. Are we checking to ensure that everything we do is really well aligned with our vision and values? So it's just fantastic, the integrity, that kind of alignment that we're looking for. Are we living the vision? Are the actions that how the staff and volunteers treat participants and clients and community, how the board treats the staff and the board relates to each other, all that kind of stuff. Is it living the vision? Is it putting those values into action? So this is not as simple as it sounds. It's not just about having being able to tick off, yes, we've got a mission statement, yes, we've got a value statement, yes, we've got a vision statement. They are useful things to have. They may be necessary, but they're not sufficient. They can be excuses for not actually being the true values guardian. Does that make sense? This is something more. It's about seeing these things in action and overseeing the organisation to make sure these things are lived and true and alive. On the other hand, it is very simple. It actually, the great thing I like about this framework is it doesn't give us another task to do that will take more time. It just gives us another way of doing every task. So it's basically saying that all the decisions that are made, are we running them through the mission, vision and values lens? As board members, when we make any decision or any discussion, all the activities, all the oversight, are we running it through this lens? So it's not adding extra things to do, it's just adding a different way of, or a focused way of doing all the things that we need to do. Okay, so that, as you can tell, I quite like this framework. It changed my life, it can change yours too. It certainly would have made me a very different manager. I wish I had had this kind of way of seeing things before. Some of the stuff I kind of knew, but it wasn't as clear when I read about this. In this last bit of time that we've got together, I just want to look at some, how we keep focused in good governance, and to talk briefly about what's ahead in the governance bites to come. So we came up with some great ideas about good governance, and if you go into most dictionaries and look at the definition of governance, you will find something completely useless. Mostly they define governance as managing and don't make any distinctions between the two. But if you look below the definition, some dictionaries have, I have to think, so to make sure I say the right word, the etymology. I don't mean the study of insects, I mean the origin of the word, whichever, there's etymology and entomology, whichever is not the study of insects. They have the origin of the word underneath a lot of dictionaries. And if you look at the origin of governance in English, you'll see that it comes originally from the Greek kybernon via the Latin gubernare. And these words in the Greek and the Latin meant originally to steer, especially as in a boat. So and there's a little bit of that in the sense of governing a car, a governor on a car kind of limits where things can go. But we've kind of lost that in the English. It's really about steering. And in these books about governance, you'll find long definitions, which are more helpful, I must admit, than the dictionary definition. But are so long that I always forget them. But the thing that I can remember is a picture like steering, not rowing. And if I ever worry, am I not doing the governing, am I doing something else? I just ask myself, am I still steering, not just rowing? The rowing has to happen, because if you just sit there steering all day, you don't get very far. But it's not the governance role. It may be the same people in their volunteer roles doing the rowing at another point, but that's not the setting direction, the aligning with the mission, vision and values, which is the governance bit of what the committee does. Committees can do other things. They can do management, they can do operations, they can do lots of other things, but the governance bit is this steering. Like all metaphors, you don't want to push it too far, and we're going to come back and look at some of the more complexities of the difference between governance and management at next month's session. That's what we're going to focus on, getting the balance right, and how we do that in practice and how we negotiate the differences, because one of the things we'll talk about is there's no single formula that will fit every organisation in every context, despite what some books tell you. You have to work out how you get the balance right for your organisation. And this is not to suggest that, say you have a paid manager, they've got nothing to contribute to the direction setting. Of course they do. but it's not their key and only job. They also have to do the management, they have to row the boat as well. And one of the handy things about the funny way that Pakeha rowboats, as opposed to paddle canoes, other people paddle canoes, is that we face each other when we do that, like the picture here. So that that is a nice little extra bit to the metaphor, because it helps show that where the steerer and the rower have to actually work together, and they both see different perspectives, that where we've been and where we're going, and they add them together to get the overall picture. So, as I said, you don't want to take metaphors too far, but personally, I found this one a nice kind of simple thing to remember, a simple little mantra to remember, and much easier than all those complex, long definitions that you get in the books. So, that's these are my 3 big messages, and you'll know they are because I did them in large font. So these are the 3 big things that I hope that you might take away from today. Yes, I'll do it now. What I'd like you to do is to think about, is there anything that you would do differently, or anything any particular message you want to take back to the board? Just spend a minute or two clarifying that, by talking out loud to the other people at your table. Is there something you're going to take away from tonight that either you want to take back to the board, a key message, or something that you might think of doing differently? Just see if you can make that a little bit explicit, because one of the things about the research in human behaviour is that the more explicit we make our intentions, the more likely they are to happen. So just have a chat about have you got any intentions out of tonight?
And she's got a lot to rely on music. So how would
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. If you've got something specific, it will probably help you to write it down. So if you want to write it down on your placemat, just a reminder, it's only 5 more minutes until the judging of the most colourful messages placemat. I've only got a few more minutes to put the finishing touches. So I just wanted to say a couple of things about what's ahead. So we've got 6 sessions. This is the first of them, and the other sessions, which are all on the first Wednesday of the month from now on, starting in March, not next week. So in March we'll look at boards and managers getting the balance right. In April we'll look at keeping it legal, the board's legal obligations. In May, we're looking at the board's role in setting strategy. How do you do it? In June, we'll look at the secret of better board meetings. And I've got 3 really handy tools that will, most people find it very helpful for that. And then in July, we look at getting the right people on your board and helping them disembark when it's time. Okay. Can you say more about that? But you got to wait for July for that. That's a winter topic when everyone's run down. So we'll meet at the same time, though there may be a change in location. Just look out for that. And if you're not a member of the Facebook group, that's where you can find it. I think it's Marl Kai K Governance, all one word. It's the last bit after Facebook groups. Okay, and I think probably Volunteer Marlborough could send that link out with the next notice to make sure people have it. We've probably done it already, but we might do it again.
You can also go to the Volunteer Marlborough Facebook page and go to groups and find it there.
Good, that's an easier way to remember it. Yeah. Great. Did everyone hear that? You can go to Volunteering Marlborough Facebook page and then groups under that will take you to this as well. One of the other things that RADA has supported, as well as funding these 6 after 5 events, is that they've funded me for some time each month to provide one-on-one support or coaching or work with either individual chair or a board or whatever. The thing they haven't funded is my travel. So what that means is, if you can organise it around before or after one of these meetings, then I can do that, okay? Or otherwise you might have to find a way to pay for my travel. I'm based in Christchurch. Or especially if it's a coaching session with the chair, we can do that by Skype or FaceTime or one of the other thousands of other video conferencing things we can do. So have a think of that. You've got the 6 months to do it, but over that time it will be just first in, first served. So if you're interested and have a need for a particular consultation, then feel free to just email me. So I'm garth@leave.org.nz and we can try and organise something. So I think that's the main things I needed to say. I always say inspiration is what happens on the way home from the meeting, so I'm sure I'll think of something else. But hopefully that's the main thing. And that just leaves us with the award for the most colourful, messiest PlayStation. So I'm going to ask each table to identify who they want to nominate. It's a very good entries. But I think the prize goes to Nikki. Don't worry, there's a prize every month.
Wow.
It's fabulous too. Unfortunately, or you could give every second link to, sorry, what's your name again? Beth, you give every second link to Beth. Depends whether she insists. I think she's going to put all her eggs in next month's basket. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. See you in a month's time. Well, I can do that, arrange to do that. So normally I just put a whole day. Like, it's got a second I can do that. Because I can bring work in pizza.
You can do next one like that, you need to.
Yeah, so let it's not quite the same as making the see what it's like next Yes, yeah. Well, have a look at the works and see which one is okay.
Hopefully we can save it quickly.
Yeah.
So Volunteer Marlborough, podcast, so I've got any questions about it?
This is going to reduce it.
No,
This is it.
Produced by American so some of these translate.
Well, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
So you got a lot of you did that right.
And I'll get them online. Yeah, well, it seems it looks better, I think, than because if you're doing rows, you can't. Yeah. So if that it's also the volunteer Marlborough because otherwise it's organising. I don't know if they have something. Oh, yeah. I don't know if they have something else in mind or not.
That's great.
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah. Well, that's great.
No, that's right. Still, it's just waiting for it to come. Oh, I'm not running them. Over here. Or maybe we'll get across the yeah. Good night. Good to see you.
Doing something.
Yeah.
They're just saying yes,
not very far. And some
we do, yeah.
Yeah, because
They just come regularly to us.
Yeah, so it's clear and understood.
we were, I had hoped to use St. Mary's Parish Center, but they've got Oscars running until almost 6 o'clock, so those are just that way bit. And this room just isn't.
So we know the dates.
Yeah.
Got the dates.
That would be amazing. Okay, that would be great. We could use some budget for renting the space as well, so, and as long as it's got a lift so that people can get up there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that
Yeah.
No, I do think it's
So-
doing so well.
Great. The other thing I can also do is one-on-one sessions with managers or staff. But if you want to talk about how you want to
envelope feedback.
stage or want to be involved, so think about